Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to campus. My name is André Barrense. I'm the head of Campus São Paulo. It's a great pleasure to host you here. This is a English-only event, so we'll be speaking in English. Hi, everyone who's also watching us live. First, it's a great pleasure to host Jackie here. Jackie gently accepted the invitation since she was in Brazil to tell us a little about her work as the director of the Silicon Valley Bank, mostly focused on Latin America, where she leads all the venture capital relationships as well as business development. Jackie has an amazing pathway in her professional career. She's been in Latin America for many years, mainly in Panama and Mexico, always dealing with venture capital investments, mainly focused on startup and technology companies. She has been in Brazil for 2 weeks, so she knows quite well the ecosystem so far, and I'm pretty sure we're going to understand much more of how the bank and she sees the ecosystem here and the investment landscape within the next few hours. Few minutes. Okay, so please, let's welcome Jackie and enjoy the afternoon.
Thank you, Andres. I'm going to see. Oh. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's a real honor to be here. My face is really big. I don't think I've ever seen my face this big before. So thank you so much for joining me. And like Andre said, I'm hoping just to go over a little bit about what we do here in Brazil and how we work with startup companies. So I'm going to maybe sit down if that's okay with you guys. I actually kind of want to make it short so we can do Q&A at the end and answer any questions you might have about the bank, about our work, and about how Silicon Valley sees Brazil. But to get started, I would love to know a little bit about you guys. So if you could raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur. Cool. Maybe if you're an investor. Bank or big company, other company. Very cool. And maybe you don't know what you are? Okay. Awesome. That's okay too. Hopefully, we can help you or we can inspire you to be part of this amazing community that's not only here at Google campus, but also as we're seeing around the region. So to kind of start off about Silicon Valley Bank, who we are, our vision is truly to be the bank that services the high-tech, high-growth companies around the world. And all of their investors, and to be the premier kind of leader and to support the entrepreneurs that run these ventures. This is kind of a little bit about us, so you can kind of get a sense. So we started 33 years ago, as you can tell by the name, in Silicon Valley, working with technology companies, principally in hardware and infrastructure, software, life sciences, health tech, energy, private equity, and the very high-tech industry of wine. As some of you know, Napa Valley is very close to us, and so wine is a very near and dear industry to our hearts, but by and large, we've worked with these other tech sectors. Below here on the chart, you can see that we now bank almost more than half of all the VC, venture capital-backed companies in the US. And in 2014, of all the companies that went public, almost 65% of them were our companies. So we've really kind of built this baseline to want to support high-tech, high-growth companies in the US and now around the world. So you can see in this map, actually, I like to start there because it's a little bit more fun to talk about. The orange areas are where we have offices. So we now have offices around the US, in the UK, Israel, and China. And the blue is where my group participates. So I'm part of the Global Gateway Expansion, International Expansion Group. And so these are where we have clients where we don't have an office. So of the entrepreneurs, how many of you guys love your bank that you have here? That's fun. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So the nice thing is Silicon Valley Bank wants to make it as easy as possible for any of these companies trying to do innovative things in their markets to open an account. With us, you can essentially open an account, put money in less than in about 2 to 3 days, and you never have to come into our office. We actually don't have offices. We have, I think, one maybe in California. And so the nice thing is that we can do everything online, and it's so fun to talk to entrepreneurs who are like, Really? You don't need me to come in? And we actually like to leverage all the amazing technology that now exists for our banking services, because we like to hold ourselves to the same standards. So we want to provide one of these kind of culture and environment where entrepreneurs do love their bank, and I'm happy to say that people do say that about us, even the fintech companies. So that's a real bonus for us. And on the top is a little bit kind of banking terms, but those are a lot of what we, some of the things that we work on. So the first, as I mentioned, just general bank accounts. We do help with work with funds, and we do a lot of research and valuation. As you can probably know, since we work with all these companies, we can help kind of figure out and measure what the valuation might be. We do specific things for the US, like a 409A, but by and large, we can also help other emerging markets, compare and contrast what's happening in the US. And right now, we're almost, actually those numbers are a little bit old, but we're a $49 billion bank, and we're about to cross to $50 billion. So we're growing and actually kind of crossing a really interesting threshold in our history. So now I kind of just wanted to touch on why I think Brazil matters, and this is one of my favorite quotes. So we hosted an event with Dave McClure, and he's amazing in a lot of different ways, as I'm sure you guys know a lot about 500 startups. But he said, there are no emerging markets, there are just markets, and the emerging markets happen to be where growth is happening faster. And I really love that, because I think a lot of times the perspective focuses on some of the developed markets in a lot of different ways, but there's so many really awesome reasons to be excited about Brazil. So this is how we kind of view emerging markets. And as you can see, Brazil from 2014 to 2050 will be the 5th largest economy in the world. So you can't ignore that. Going to supersede Germany, Japan, Russia in projected GDP. So a lot of things to be excited about. So this also is, screams at us opportunity as we look to see who are going to be the leaders for the future and who are going to drive a lot of the businesses that happen. And also, Brazilians are really connected. As I'm sure you know, we love Facebook, WhatsApp, all these social tools. Brazilians are on them all the time. I think making most of my meetings these past 2 weeks, I've probably made most of them through WhatsApp and not email. I've also, some of you from this event have contacted me through Facebook. And so it's now a tool that people use a lot more than what traditionally you would think in business and both personal. So this is also really exciting, because not even, I think a little bit more than half connect people now will be connected in the future. So you'll see this number kind of double over time. So this is another reason we're super excited about Brazil. And this is a fun graph that we took from our LAFCA friends, I think might be here. So when we talk about venture capital, Brazil is obviously a huge leader. So from 2011 to 2015, you can see Brazil is the large blue circle that kind of dominates Latin America. Brazilians, by and far, have raised the most money in terms of venture capital in the last 5 years. And on the other side, have done 63% of the venture capital investments. So we just see that as continued opportunity. Even amongst current macroeconomic situation, funds and companies still keep growing, and this data kind of proves that. So we're really excited that that's still happening. Mexico is catching up. You see some other countries like Argentina, who had a really interesting political shift, kind of catch up, but I think by and large, Brazil remains the leader. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of Zika, Dilma Olympics that happens in the US, and that's hard to combat with when you know what an amazing country and opportunity is. And so it is true, right? This year is going to be tough for Brazil. The story is going to be hard for Brazil, especially in international markets. And as I go back and share with the bank, what I'm doing and try to tell the true stories. One of the reasons I'm here is to talk to our clients and say, hey, what's really going on? What's really happening? Last week, we were with a bunch of investors from Europe and the US and some other investors here in Brazil, and got a really interesting perspective. And so there's no doubt that this year is going to be hard, but I think, and many people at the bank think, that great companies are created in up and down market cycles. So here's kind of a quick perspective from 2000 to 2014. You guys know when the crisis happened in 2008, 2009. I mean, what company was made then, right? Uber, one of the ones we know the most, Airbnb, WhatsApp. I mean, arguably, some of the most amazing, innovative companies came through the two hardest years in the US crisis. So, if anything, this might be the year of opportunity for entrepreneurs and the year of opportunity for you guys to take advantage of more talent in the market, right? Big companies aren't hiring, big companies are firing. It's another time for you to maybe, if you are one of those people who couldn't find a job, maybe be entrepreneurial. So there's so much, we think that there's still opportunity to be excited about. So also to give you a little bit of an example of who we work with, this is a fun slide. So we work with almost 100 clients here in Brazil. We have almost 6 venture funds, 4 which are up here, and over 80 startups. And so these are some of the, I'm sure some of you recognize some of the names. They all have bank accounts with us. Some of them have other banking products. Some of them have even, looked at debt. None of them have, we don't do direct investments, but some of the funds we have invested, we do have a fund of funds. So these are kind of the companies and the innovators that we are really excited about and that we work with and that we hope to hopefully work with you guys or share what we've learned by being with them. So this is a little bit of a maybe banking speak slide, so feel free to ask questions about this if you have afterwards. So these are some of the things that we do. So as you think of a traditional bank, you need a bank account, you need to receive money, and you need sometimes if you have a global company, which I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about, you need to think about multi-currency, you need to think about foreign exchange, how to manage your investment, how to manage your own money if you're bootstrapping. So we can do all of those things from the US. And we can also do a variety of things like trade finance, global treasury services, and analytics. So like I mentioned before, we have this plethora of companies and information from the US, and we can help you think about, and even in Brazil now, so 100 in Brazil, and we have 350 clients in Latin America. So we can also help you think about what does it look like, what does the market look like for you, what does valuation look like for you. And another fun thing that we like to do, which is why I'm here, is make local connections, not only for you each other here in Brazil, but even more importantly with our whole team back in Silicon Valley. So we probably work with most, if not all, of the funds, accelerators, and groups there. And anytime our clients go to the Bay Area, want to go to Stanford, want to talk to people, want to meet with the universities, we can be a connection there and be a bridge there to share ideas. Because we know that you all are a huge part of what's being built here in Brazil, and we know that not everything in Silicon Valley is transferable. You have to make it in the Brazilian way, right? But we want to be able to hopefully share best practices and see what we've seen, and so you guys can take that and apply it in a way that makes sense here. So if you're a company, which a lot of you are, and you want to work with us, this is kind of the baseline of what we hope to see in initially opening a bank account and then looking for further services. And like I mentioned before, those are the four industries that we like to work with. And we love to see kind of companies that you don't have to want to go to the US, but we love to see a global focus, right? That Brazil is the perfect place to start. It's the perfect place to take off because I know the market and I have the great talent here, but we know that we can go other places. I think that's one thing that we're really excited about. And then also, there's a ton of, well, at least what I've seen so far, a lot of different accelerators, programs that you guys can be a part of, if you've been a part of those or have received VC or angel investment. So this is just a little bit of criteria, kind of our baseline right now of what we look for. So obviously, this is how we support the ecosystem. So one being here at campus, Sao Paulo is very exciting in this new beautiful space. So we love to enable connections. So not only the US, but like I mentioned, UK, Asia, and Israel, where we have offices. And then helping you actually launch your company. So this is my first time being a banker. I actually come from the venture capital, private equity, entrepreneur space. And so the bank actually likes to bring in people like myself who've kind of been there, who can provide, do value add services and talk about how do you build a company there? How do you raise money? And so it has kind of a unique touch to it if you want to launch into other markets. And then like this, we oftentimes do happy hours, we do get-togethers, we do dinners. We love to bring people together. We love to facilitate those connections. So hopefully next time I'm back in Brazil, maybe we can do another larger event. We'll buy the cervejas, and maybe some wine by then. So it's one word I know. And sorry, this is really small. I didn't want it to be this way. But so just, I was thinking, what could I share with you guys about the US market right now that's happening that might be relevant if you're thinking about going there, starting your company there, or being based here and just considering maybe at one point I'd like to go. So early stage in the US oftentimes requires relocation. And so that means if you want to get funding in the US, a lot of the investors like to be close to their investments, which makes a lot of sense, right? You want to be close to the company that you want to support. So oftentimes larger companies, later stage, doesn't necessarily need that particular closeness. But if you're thinking about an early stage company and you want to go to the US, it might be best to think about having a group of people that work there, maybe starting an office there, having your programmers here, thinking about a unique situation where you can have some companies based in the US. The second thing that I had up here is a little bit about fundraising. And so fundraising is actually a little bit more selective at the moment. I'm not sure for you who might be following, VC in the US kind of was on the kind of going down the end of last year and even the beginning of this year as we see some readjustments in valuations. So the unicorns, as sexy it is to be a unicorn, are thinking about what does it actually mean for the market? What is it, when you go public and then, the valuation is decreased or it's reassessed? What is the actual market value? So we're seeing a lot of this little bit of a unicorn bubble starting to pop, starting to go down, some more realistic values starting to come up. So while that was happening, a lot of VCs were putting the brakes on investing, and in particular, investing abroad. So, but there is an interest in seeing now that, in particular in Brazil, seeing where things go. Now, now that things have kind of going up. You guys Dilma has been moved out, and there's some political change happening. I think there is some interest in see what's to come, and then. For example, thinking about going to the US, sometimes the best service providers are very expensive. That's not to say it's not worth the laying the groundwork, but oftentimes, paying for some of the lawyers and some of the other service providers can be very cost prohibitive. And so it might be easier to think about, do I really want to go to the US? And if I do, it might be worth setting that groundwork to then for future rounds not get into any trouble with the cap table, with your structuring, with any of those things, because that can be a really big headache. And as we all know in Brazil, taxation is one of the hardest places to do business and do taxes. So setting that groundwork, if you want to do multi-country or if you want to just do Brazil, is really important. So with that, here's my contact. Like I said, I would love this to be a conversation and hopefully just give you a broad overview of how we work in Latin America. You can email me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm okay if you want to message me on Facebook. Very open to social media. So let me know if you have any other questions now, and we can also chat afterwards if not. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie. I think it was very insightful. Just before we kick off with Q&A from the audience, I would love to ask you something. So
Sure.
After 2 weeks, you've been to Belo Horizonte, you've been to Florianópolis, now São Paulo. What is the perspective you're taking out of this trip from like a field perspective?
Sure.
On what are the roadblocks that we have on maturing as an ecosystem? Yeah. And if you had like if we could wish something, what would you wish us in the next 5 years to develop as a startup scene?
Great question. Yeah. So after being here for the last 2 weeks, I think there's a similar thing that always comes up that I'm sure people talk about is just exits. So thinking about what are going to be the stories and these big companies that you can look to aspire. There's a few examples that we can look to that have raised significant amounts of capital. But for investors and international investors, I think liquidity is always a big issue. So in Brazil, you see a lot of funds doing Series A, some doing Series B, and then some of the accelerators and early stage angels doing seed, but you kind of get lost in the C, D, E level. So what ends up happening is a lot of the companies have to sell too early. They can't be the big companies that they'd like to be. And then if they get that big, you kind of ask, who's going to buy them, right? Or is there a market is there a public market to go on to? So I think, if filling that larger gap now, I think Brazil's is very sophisticated. When we think about VC in Latin America, it is the most sophisticated market, but there's still that kind of larger gap now. Who's going to pick up those bigger deals? And that would take all of these companies probably to the next level and hopefully create kind of the next big success case story. I will say, despite the macroeconomic situation, I think that's hard for international investors and others who want to come here. It's very just, I don't know, we'll see what happens. But by and large, Brazilian investors are still very much investing in Brazil, and they're interested in some of the smarter and I think more, kind of involved in this space know now is a time to be investing. And those in the US who know this know that the dollar is going farther, right? So the volatility with the real can actually be beneficial if you're in the US. And even better for Brazil if you can have more capital to go further. So I would say that in terms of the next 5 years, what I would hope for is more spaces like this, I think, would be amazing. Be kind of filling that gap of the larger stage, and then hopefully providing some kind of framework to bring more liquidity in the market and to fulfill kind of the venture capital cycle. So then it can just be, because oftentimes what you happen, as you see in the US, the entrepreneurs who are really successful, they kind of come back in, right? They want to stay and they want to create, they want to keep innovating. So you create this innovation cycle that's really powerful, but there's still a little bit of a gap there.
My second question is, so you mentioned something that I think it's very interesting, you're looking for companies that are born with a global mentality, but at the same time, you also highlight the barriers for getting into a market such as the US. And I recall 2 weeks ago, Sergey Brin was at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Stanford, and he said something that a lot of people thought was awkward, but he said, don't build a company in Silicon Valley. Like, come to Silicon Valley when it's time to come, right? And here in Brazil, we have the temptation of really staying in a local market that is just so big, right? But my question is, so when is it the right time to go global, and what you've seen in other markets? How are these companies approaching this next step into going to foreign markets?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can also speak to what our companies that we have here in Brazil. It's my view, and I'm happy to hear others' view, that the global mentality kind of starts from the beginning. There are some people who stumble onto it because they build a product and they realize, oh wow, I've launched this into the global marketplace and I didn't realize so many people in Japan loved it, so now I'm going to be a global company, not Brazil company. But I think that mentality starts from the beginning. And in terms operationally, kind of what makes sense for you and what makes sense for the capital that you want to put in the company, because it's not always, it can be capital intensive to open another office, to test a new market. And so, I would say when you're thinking about the steps of your company, if you know you want to be global in the beginning, kind of do a map of where you'd like to be based on your metrics. And you can start doing small tests in small markets by hiring one person, maybe without an office. It's very easy. And you can grow from there. If you're another company that maybe is building something more very Brazil specific, there could be a later stage when you start raising more capital. That's the point where you say, all right, I've raised a couple $1 million or double-digit $1 million, and now I'm going to use a part of this because I really think, and I've been seeing and expanding globally, that this might be the best fit there. So there's kind of two ways to approach it. But oftentimes, from the very beginning, I think we live in a world now where all business is global business. So I think it kind of starts from the beginning.
Please, any questions? Okay. Bruno? Can somebody help me with the mics?
Okay, hi Jackie. I'm Bruno Diniz from Intercore Solutions and Next Bank. Next Money now we formerly know as Next Bank. I'm very into the fintech scene here in Brazil, and I would like to know, because you've been, you have a time at Venture Lab, Accion in Mexico. If you could point out some differences from our ecosystem and the Mexican ecosystem, if you can clarify it for us.
Sure, in fintech or broadly?
In fintech, more specifically, but if you could go more broadly, it would be helpful as well.
Sure. So I think Brazil has a very particular banking system, and one that is very large and concentrated. I think given the historical ups and downs of some of the country, a lot of the kind of mental brain power has often gone into the financial sector. So you have very talented people, you have very big institutions to having dealt with that through the years. And not to say that Mexico hasn't gone through that, but I think in particular that's really unique here. So you have these really concentrated groups who for a while, I think startups weren't sure if they could compete, if it was going to be feasible. But I think in the last year and a half, we've seen that really change. Not to say they haven't put up a fight, but I think more often than not have gone the other route, right? You see Itaú, Cubo, you see Bradesco, you see even Santander is, thinking about a variety of different ways to work with startups. So the difference is just the concentration and a little bit of how there's still kind of a barrier to entry, whereas in Mexico, it's very easy to open a lending company. It's very easy to just start almost a fintech. It's much easier to do that, and I think that applies across all sectors. I think it's much easier to open a company in Mexico than Brazil, not just based on some of the things that I know, but Mexico doesn't have as much of concentration, so you see that. So there's just more here. But here, the nice thing is there's a few companies like Nubank, like Uobolso. You see some others that are sort of doing financial services that are growing and raising significant capital, and you don't see that kind of capital going to Mexico yet. You see, actually, in Mexico, I think because there's so many middle layer players, you see a lot of guys looking to buy, and they want to kind of capture those up. And a lot of players in Mexico are also, they're banks that were bought by American companies. So you see a lot of that kind of interest in innovation there. But by and large, the difference is Brazil is much bigger, as you saw kind of in those stats before, and just overall VC activity and fundraising. The big difference right now is I think Mexican investment funds it's much easier for them to raise money. The story is easier for international. Mexico's still pretty stable macroeconomic, they're growing, it's closer to the US, where Brazil right now, people are kind of like, it's an amazing market, but right now, let's wait and see. So at this point in time, I think Mexico has a little bit of a advantage. But that's not to say it's better or worse. It's just the timing of what they're working on. And the Mexican government has put in a lot of money, similar to the Brazilian government, in these funds. So I think now is a unique time, and the fintech is just, the spaces are very different, and there's just it's a little bit easier to be a fintech. But I would say still, even the companies here have raised a lot more money. So.
My name is Paulo França. I am a headhunter. Congratulations for your exposure, and welcome to Brazil and your bank. The next challenge or problem of Brazil is people, human resource, because you have a lot of people to export, to go to the abroad because the economic situation in Brazil. What's your opinion to invest in companies in Brazil, it's important to develop these people to work in these companies, in startups? In
e-commerce?
Yes.
In particular?
No, all the sectors.
All the sites.
All the sectors to intend to invest.
Yeah, so I think talent is obviously a huge issue for all companies. It's probably, in the last 5 years, in the companies I've worked with, the #1 issue is finding and building a good team. And I've been talking to a lot of people in the last 2 weeks, and they've actually said, in particular the startup world, it's harder for corporations to hire, and corporations in Brazil are downsizing. So it's actually a really good time for startups now to hire talent. But I will say, to your point about the talent that's needed, there will be more tech jobs needed in the future. There will be more programming needed in the future. And I think, startups and groups like Google, like other large companies, can influence the universities in particular and say, we are, and I think I can't remember who talked about it yesterday, but we need more data scientists, for example. And just telling the universities kind of what more they can do to create that kind of profile. So, in the US, you see a lot of alternative education. So you see a lot of coding schools. You see a lot of 2-year like technical schools, and those are bubbling up because you can do those and not need a 4-year university and make pretty good money. So I think even those kinds of programs that are bubbling up in the U.S. could be interesting for Latin America.
Hello, welcome to Brazil.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, how do you see the Brazilian ecosystem, startup ecosystem, in the next 20 years? And the second one is about the whole difference about between American and Brazilian entrepreneurship.
Yeah, 20 years is a long time. I mean, maybe, yeah, 2050, yeah. I guess I did mention the economy. I might have to ask PwC, who did that study, to also help me with this answer. Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I mean, like I mentioned before, I hope that kind of full cycle of innovation would continue to flourish. So you have capital starting from the lowest level all the way up to liquidity and IPO, and so that companies can be built and continue to grow, and those who make money continue to reinvest and kind of continue the new ideas and circles. So I think that's what I would hope. It's hard to predict the future in 20 years. But to your point about the ecosystem, the difference between San Francisco and here, I think, it's people kind of ask a lot, how do I make Silicon Valley here? I think it's hard to compare. When we think about the U.S., there's been a special innovation ecosystem happening there for a long time now. And in Latin America, some of these are fairly new, right? In Brazil, around 2005, things started to pick up. People started to be really interested. The internet really transformed the way people worked and did things. In San Francisco, in the Silicon Valley, you find a lot of that is where the brightest and best individuals from all around the U.S. go to live, and that's where they want to live. So you have this really unique place where you can be sitting at a cafe and a founder is next to you. You could see another guy from an accelerator. You can see a guy from a VC fund. And everyone's there many people are there trying to think of the next big idea that would change the world. So there's a unique mentality about it that it's existed because of the history that it's had, right? And I think Sao Paulo and Brazil in general is starting that, right? And so you're starting to see the first few people who are very talented, who are very excited about this. I think it's just going to take some time to create spaces like this, to create schools that focus on technology and have this really high caliber and continue to produce programmers at the level that you need, and also to attract and keep those people here. I think there's actually quite a few Brazilians that I know who live in San Francisco because they were the best and brightest, and now they do work at IBM, they do work at Instagram, they do work at Facebook in Silicon Valley, and you think maybe what could kind of make them think about coming back, or what could keep them here, what ecosystem, or if they wanted to go abroad, how can you say that's great, go learn from the best and brightest, and then maybe bring that back here. So there's kind of a combination of those things I think could be interesting.
Hi, Jackie. Bruno.
Oh, hi.
My name is Bruno Alves Pinto. So, first of all, thank you for a lecture. We love it. We have a startup in Agtech. It's called Colheita Direta, and stands for direct harvest. Okay. And so Brazil has in his soul a very agriculture movement, and we are known as the farm of the world, but at the same time we're facing difficult to get to know the VCs in agtech, and we don't know why it's still too small, the market regarding VCs here in Brazil just for agtech. Can you tell us about the scenario in the world, in the US, and maybe guess why here in Brazil we still don't have this movement?
Have you heard of Monsanto?
Yes, 5 days ago, right?
Yeah. So that's exciting, right? I mean,
of course.
Big money for ag tech in Brazil. I think someone finally realized huge market, agricultural, technology, experience. People have been working in this. So I think that's starting to change, right? I think that's a really cool announcement that's been happening. In terms of when I see ag tech too, a lot of people are also focusing on Africa. It's another large continent and large area where there's a lot of agriculture. Argentina also, there's some, in particular around livestock. We see a few things. And in the U.S., I mean, even in the U.S., you see a lot of interesting things trying to be done, not only with the food and how processes are managed, but using sensors, using drones to map and manage, using irrigation systems, and even for the smallholder farmer, thinking about how to provide them better information. So ag tech, I think, by and large, I've seen a lot of interest in Africa right now, but with this announcement in Monsanto, there are funds and there are more I think more governments are interested in thinking about agricultural technology because they know that they don't have all the answers. They don't know how they're going to have to double the food supply for their country, and so they're going to more and more depend and look to companies like yours and look to VC funds. I honestly don't know of any specific example right now in Silicon Valley, but I will say the funds that I have talked to here are very open to investing in agricultural technology and understand that it's a real big opportunity. I think Monashi is invested in a company, and there's a few others that I've met actually in Silicon Valley who are doing interesting things for farmers. So, I think it seems to me you're at a good spot because it's kind of, you're even before right now where it's about to take off. So that's kind of what I've seen so far.
Can I just build on something that the question reminded me? So agriculture, education, healthcare, they're all big problems, but also big opportunities when you think of emerging countries, such as Brazil. And it reminds me of something that it's always a question to entrepreneurs like you should build what matters, right? And Peter Thiel says that we were promised flying cars and we got 140 characters, right? So thinking of Given your experiences as a VC and I'm a banker, what is this balance between on the VC and who's investing? What is this balance of investing on things that are super liquid and like fast in returns, versus investing on things that are more maturing in terms of time to take, but also can create a huge impact? So what is this equation between returns and impact?
Yeah. That's a really good question. In particular, as you see the rise of impact investment funds, there's a lot of new VC money or groups that are investing with some kind of social impact. I mean, I would argue any big problem you actually want to solve is going to create impact, in particular in emerging markets. Because if we look at the populations broadly, most people that live in the markets aren't middle class, lower class, emerging middle class or lower class. And so the problems that they face are very real, and if they're solved, will drastically change their lives. In the US, I think Uber obviously changed our life, but it didn't mean that I had better, cheaper food accessible to me, right? It didn't change the way that I did business. So there is a sense of, for the bank, I think for VC in general, our perspective is that most of these companies in technology is going to bring us closer together. Developing these new innovations is going to make things cheaper and build a better world. At least that's our hope. So broadly speaking, I think that's what we hope for. In emerging markets in particular, there is the understanding some things take longer, and there's patient capital. I would say, though, that balanced time and return, there's always going to be figuring out what's going to be best financially, but I think there are other options that you can figure out along the way to decide, does this make sense for the bank, or does this make more sense for a VC fund, or does it make more sense for even the government or nonprofit to put money in? And hopefully, as a bank, as a person who's trying to make a financially responsible fiduciary decision, you can say, how am I connecting with all these guys who are important to kind of jump in the value chain when needed? But we have 2 investment funds, and they're very traditional VC. One's a fund of funds, one's a direct fund, and they're doing really interesting things and have invested in Brazil. But I also think, to your point, the impact investors are being more patient, per se. But I think VC is changing, and I think people know that some businesses just take longer than others, and there's a 10-year horizon, but maybe to wait for the longer opportunity is worth it. And then once you get to that point, you can decide with your investors if it's worth it or not. So there's always depending kind of that question, but I think VC is kind of changing to think about, if we have to get to that point, can we wait, can we not? And I think if it's a great opportunity, by and large, people are interested to see where it goes. So.
Hi, Jackie. My name is Jose. Hope you're having a great time here in Brazil. And my question, I would like to know your opinion. What are the biggest challenges for Brazilian startups, and what can we do to make it through?
Thanks. Lots of caipirinhas. I would love to hear that from you guys. I mean, to be quite frank, this is my second time in Brazil, and I've seen challenges broadly that are fairly general across the board between Latin America. I mean, the main thing that's been repeated a lot is just doing business. Starting a company takes on average 100 days. The taxation structure, figuring out how to make that work is complicated. But the fun thing is a lot of the investors kind of think if you can do it in Brazil, you can do it anywhere. So that's good, fun to know for you guys. And with the macroeconomic downturn, I think, like I said, it's just a little bit harder to convince the international community, but the domestic opportunity still is kind of screaming loud and clear, and there's more talent, and I think the global focus is changing. So some investors think about, Brazilian entrepreneurs just think Brazil, like you mentioned. They only, 200 million people, of course, I don't need to go anywhere else. And when investors really wanted to see the global mindset. But I honestly, the companies I've spoken to in the last 2 weeks, and the accelerators all are saying global, right? Global, global, global. You see a lot of the big success cases coming from Argentina, and you're like, wait, what? They have 48 million people, obviously very smart, but it's because they're so small, they have to think global. So that's why you see some of the success cases that have kind of propagated that platform. But I see that change. So, I mean, I would love to hear from you what you think. I'm throwing it back at you now. What you think some of the main challenges are in the country. But that's kind of just what I've seen.
Now you go.
Hi, Jackie.
Good challenge.
Hi. So I saw...
I just asked him a question back really quick.
Sorry.
2 seconds, sorry.
Sorry. Go.
I think some people, they have great ideas. They have great ideas and they have a great reason to make that. I think a lot of people, like you said, are trying to make the world a better place. But they don't really know how to make it happen, like how to build the company, how to structure the company, to build the team, to make it happen. And it's great to have a place like Google Campus here in Brazil to get these people together that think the same way. But I still think that this market's still growing, it's still very small, and it's good that you have people from outside of Brazil looking for us. Wishing to put money here inside in the companies because the economics here is really bad like that. I think Brazilians are really not happy with the whole situation, and we don't have really good perspective in the short term. So I think maybe the biggest problem now is people to believe that it can happen, and go through that and really make the effort to make it happen.
Totally. I think the power of this community, too, is you're in a particular time where, I mean, entrepreneurs are essentially creators, right? And they're creating the technologies. They're going to create the world that we will live in the future, and that you will live in, your kids will live in, and grandkids will live in. And you're at this really important time in Brazilian history to decide how you want the Brazilian world to look like. And communities like this can get people together and bring voices together to say, yeah, we're a small company, but we want Brazil to look like this. We want Brazil to be this way. So I think you guys have a lot of power in that to move it forward, even given the tough situation. So be bold, yeah.
So, thank you, Jackie.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, sorry. I saw the products that you have from just equity perspective, so the fund of funds and the relations with the accelerators. But I would like to know more if you have a kind of a landing line for startups or for entrepreneurs directly. And if not, how do you see these opportunities here in Brazil? Because it's hard to get money from the bank as a lending perspective.
Totally. Yeah, which bank wants to lend to a cash flow negative company, right?
Yes, and also talking about guarantees and different rates.
So, so like I mentioned before, right now we don't have an office in Brazil, but that could change in the future. Well, so that means we can't do lines of credit, venture debt. So venture debt, I wish I would have put a slide in here about it. I'm sorry I couldn't go into that further. But venture debt is very different than traditional debt because we can lend to companies who have received fundraising but maybe don't have that many revenues yet. They're not cash flow positive. Don't have, technology companies. What assets are you going to give me? That kind of thing. And so we have a very unique perspective on that in the U.S. What we can do in Brazil, and we have done this before, is if we can facilitate certain kinds of trade finance, like I mentioned, certain kinds of guarantees, standby letters of credit, smaller, not lines of credit that are based on a little bit more of your contracts, your invoices. And so I'm happy to talk more if you have a specific case, but we can offer that based on what you've done in your company so far. So hopefully at some point we can do venture debt. I think there is interest in Latin America to think about how venture debt can play a part in the ecosystem, because I think, as we all know, companies take different forms and you don't always need equity. Equity, and the nice thing about debt is you don't get diluted. And oftentimes you have a partner like us, hopefully, that understands your business and can help you get to where you need. So there's actually a really long list of things that we can do with our companies in terms of trade finance. So I'm happy to share that with you after, instead of bore everyone with banking terms in English.
Hi, Jackie. I'm Maria Teresa Morazan. I work for iCare Benefits. We're a company that started in Southeast Asia, and we decided to bring it here to Latin America. And I wanted you to share your experience when it comes to raising funds for this region, because we already have investors for that region. And when we come here, we decided to start in Brazil, basically because we see this kind of data. Fundraising in Brazil is good. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure if it's mostly for Brazilian market or if we want to expand to Latin America as a whole. What's your opinion in terms of raising funds and how venture capital and other investors see the region?
Yeah, I think venture capitalists seemingly are very optimistic. They're very bullish on regional approaches. So there was a fund that was just launched for the Pacific Alliance, which is for the countries kind of that are along the Pacific coast. And so you see more and more of these initiatives of funds and people wanting to do regional. They want to, VCs in Brazil are interested in talking to companies in Mexico, and I think more as those funds grow, you'll see more interest looking down into Brazil. My recommendation, I'm not sure if you've done any fundraising or reaching out right now, but Brazil, like that slide before, there's the concentration is here. So there's so many places you can start here, and they're going to really, I think, enjoy the regional perspective. You have a fund like Kazek, for example. They're based in Argentina, but now have someone here in Brazil. They invest regionally. There's a few other names I could throw out, but that have more a regional thesis in terms of where they invest because they see the opportunity. So, lots to start from here in Brazil and maybe Argentina, and then and you can go from there. And then often, I don't know if the Southeast Asia company has connections, but it's also if you've got an investment in Southeast Asia and it's a large market and company, oftentimes they know or can introduce you to, and that's also a really good way to get connected initially. So, thanks.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, I think we're approaching the end. I think Jackie has an appointment just after this. But if you could just put some final remarks after such a interesting brainstorming of future insights as well as previous experiences and learnings. What is what is the message you're taking from Brazil to the Valley?
It's great. So, I mean, I'm definitely going back to the Valley with a very strong innovation still happening, companies are growing, and that people and new things are happening here that are very, very exciting. And that, you know, despite the layer of what's going on around, there is this ecosystem that's growing and is continuing to grow and support each other. So I think that's the message I'm bringing back, and that there are challenges, but similarly in challenges there's even more opportunities, particularly in venture capital. So, and that's kind of what I'll be taking back, and hopefully, you know, if any of you want to chat afterwards or are interested in going to the Bay Area, or, you know, next time, I hope to be back soon, and so hope to do more things like this and support really great initiatives like Google Campus and all the other ones around here. So let me know how I can help you, how I can help your company grow, how I can help your initiative flourish. We also hope to be connectors and hope to chat with you after. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie. It's a great afternoon. And hopefully we're going to see you here at campus more often.
Yes.
So hopefully. Feel free, it's your home.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.